everyone to HTO Football. Today we have an FA Cup special lined up for you, a podcast of two halves, so make sure you have those oranges for a half-time break. Enjoy.
We are absolutely delighted to welcome a legend of the game, a double winning hero, a man whose football, coaching and broadcasting career has spanned more than 40 years and whose incredible charity and community work has so positively impacted many thousands. Such is his legend. His name in picture is plastered on the side of Arsenal's Emirates Stadium. It is with great privilege that we welcome the one and only Bob Wilson OBE.
Just to start us off, obviously, bit of a strange weekend, being VE Day in sort of tricky circumstances at the moment.
Yeah, no, it was, I have to tell you, it was really special. I mean, I live now, my wife and I live at Christchurch. We're so fortunate. We live, as I am talking to you now, I'm actually looking out onto the balcony, which is the river leading out to the sea. It's amazing. But relating, I mean, we're just so fortunate. We get so worried and concerned about, you know, mums and dads with 2 or 3 kids and on the 13th or 10th floor or whatever, but how difficult it must be. So I know we're sort of well through our lives at the moment. I'm heading for my 79th birthday in October. But coming back to what you were saying, it always means a great deal to me, VE Day. Here at Christchurch, we live in not only just by the water, but we have a marina. So all the houses are built around the marina. We're sort of very lucky because we're the front house. But everybody came out. There was an amazing last post played by one of the guys who was a trumpeter. And it
Fantastic.
Was the best I've ever heard, the last post. And then when we applauded him and we thought we were finished, remembering all those that had been lost, suddenly there was an air raid siren went off.
Wow.
And there was a young couple who acquired way back a windy, you know, the one that you wind to, and off it went on one. And we were all, oh my God, that is amazing. We'd stopped filming at that particular time. But the whole point of what I'm saying about poignancy, as far as I'm concerned, and Megs lost an uncle who was in the RAF. I lost 2 brothers. Not that I ever knew those 2 brothers. I was 4 months old when Jock, my eldest brother, very Scottish family, by the way, he was John Primrose Wilson. We might come on to that at some time. But he was a Spitfire pilot, and Jock lost his life having flown the Spitfire for a year and a half. And he was still 19, which I find just amazing. So hero number 1 for me forever will be Jock. And alongside him, so I was 4 months old when Jock was killed. And then I was not quite 2 years old when Billy, who was a rear gunner, he was William Primrose Wilson. The Primrose goes right through the family, by the way. But William Primrose. So Billy was a rear gunner in a Lancaster. And he was shot down just right on the border of Germany and France. 2 of the guys escaped. They managed to parachute. I do know the story of what happened with Billy, but it's not one I really want to go into. But 2 of the guys got out, and before he died, one of them, I think he was the radio engineer or the navigator, and I went to meet him and see him, and I got the full story of what happened, and that was an amazing story. And you know, these are my 2 heroes, certainly in my life. I have a footballing hero that we might touch upon. So Jock and Billy. So obviously the other day meant a huge amount to me. My dad had fought in the First World War in the Highland Light Infantry in the Somme, and eventually was brought home because he had pleurisy. So wartime has sort of been pretty vicious, certainly for my mum and dad. I always used to say, how could you cope? We've lost a child ourselves, but we lost Anna through cancer, not through wartime. So we are here, I was about to say, enjoying our lives at this moment. It's probably like wartime, but we're here because of Jock and Billy and all those, you know, I think in the RAF it was 80,000 that were lost in the RAF or more.
Absolutely. So it sounds a very special weekend. I think for myself, there was a little sort of very socially distant street party. We could see people observing very well from their drives only, but it was very nice to see as well. And at least the sun was shining, which was very nice.
I think my mum put in so much effort into the day that she ended up having to sit out the rest of the afternoon with the headache because of the intense planning she'd put in, bless her.
Good for her.
Absolutely. It's interesting though, that, like you say, because we will sort of jump back then, if we may, to that early childhood. I presume, therefore, did you have that sort of hanging over the family, as it were, sort of losing your two older brothers? Did you find those early years that was a dominating factor, or was football a big part of the family at that point? Was it escapism?
No. Do you know, that's a great question. Let's leave the sport out of it all. My dad was a really good sportsman, and all of us were blessed with the right genes, mesomorphs rather than ectomorphs or endomorphs. If you know what that is, you know, if you're a mesomorph, you're more or less an athlete.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, a really interesting thing, never, ever, ever did my mum and dad, my dad was a military man, and he was a firm, you know, he was a military officer, so he could be quite severe, but in a nice way, never in a way that caused a problem for me. My mum was a Presbyterian minister's daughter out of Glasgow. So I'm named after my grandfather, who I never knew, the Reverend Robert Primrose. So this really brings in the family name. My mum was Catherine Wingate Primrose, because her mum was a Wingate. So the tradition in Ayrshire was that you got your mum's maiden name. That's great if it's usually normal, but if you're going to be a goalie and make some mistakes, it is not good to be called Primrose, I promise. So anyway, you know, she had this amazing faith and belief. The one thing I am absolutely so grateful that did not happen is that my mum did not live long enough to see Anna get as ill as she got, Anna being our daughter, and have her 5-year fight with her cancer, and ultimately 6 days before her 32nd birthday lose that fight. So she believed that there was a God. She'd been brought up that way. She had these sayings, you know, even when I was a goalkeeper and I'd let in 4 or 5 Stoke ones, dearie, it'll all turn out for the best. She had this saying. And Mum, just let in 5 goals, you know, this is, you know, dearie, it'll be fine. You know, it's meant to be, everything. And she had this incredible belief that everything was meant to be. And I think that was impressed upon me, as I say, I was the youngest of 6, 5 boys, 1 girl. And there are 3 of us still alive. Jean, who's 90, in her 91st year, amazing. The 1 girl, my brother Hugh, who was sort of a mentor, who's 2 years older than me, 2.5. He's now, he's now in his 81st year. And so we were brought up in that way, and we were never allowed to have a miserable face. If I was miserable or put on a miserable face, my mum, particularly, or my dad, I was a little bit of fear of my dad, because, you know, he could be a little bit more fierce with me than she was, but she would make sure that, you know, come on, smile on your face. And so an incredible upbringing. My dad was a borough engineer and surveyor in Chesterfield. We lived in a most amazing house. The only thing, obviously, once I became interested in trying to be a footballer was when I, at 15 years of age, was in the England under-15 schoolboy team with Nobby Stiles. We were the 2 Man United went for, Matt Busby. And when we went to sign the forms, on the way home, I said, Dad, what's the story? Because they left me out of the room. And he said, I've told them no. And it was, what do you mean you've told them no? This is Man United. This is the Busby Babes. Yeah. Listen, son, football is not a proper job. Football's not a proper job. I need you to get a proper job, but only 1 in 1,000 ever makes it to the top level. If you get a proper job and you still want to have a go, you get my blessing. But at this moment in time, I've said no to them. And United lost interest, and he pointed me, I was either going into the police force or going to Loughborough University, which I did, became a school teacher in physical education and history, got into the England amateur squads at the time. And it was from there that initially Wolves were interested, and I played for Wolves reserves a few times, and then Arsenal came in. And from the moment I stepped into Highbury, and onto the pitch at what is it's the most extraordinary stadium even now as it is in flats. There was never another football club I ever wanted to be involved with other than Arsenal.
Yeah, now, but by that point, Bob, I'm assuming obviously there was another hero that was in your mind. What did the famous Bert Troutman teach you? As you obviously went into train to be a teacher. What did you learn off Bert and that famous '56 final that obviously we will definitely be touching on?
Well,
I'm just interested in your thoughts of where that admiration came from.
Yeah, it came from a mirror image. I know that sounds a little bit crazy, but and in my coaching, I've always said to people, look, you can't all play like Pat Jennings. You all can't play like David Seaman with this incredible presence they have, like they're never going to be scared, like they fill the goal mouth like an actor. I wasn't like that. I was head first, masses of injuries. And of course, that was Bert's way. So as a coach for 28 years at Arsenal, wasn't my job. It was an unpaid job because there were no goalkeeping coaches at the time, and I brought into that. But it was a fact that my style worked for me. Bert's style worked for him. I probably did it a bit better than Bert because I never broke my neck. But I did have a punctured lung, 9 broken ribs, broken arm, dislocated elbow, scars all over my head. But my style worked for me. And to be honest with you, had I not played in that way, I don't think I would have made it because I know when I was struggling at Arsenal and Billy Wright was the manager and all sorts of rows going on, I actually had a big fallout with him. He's a lovely man, Billy Wright, but I had a bit of a fallout and I said, well, I'm off, I'm going to go. And it took one coach, a man called Al Field, who had played centre half for Arsenal. He was the reserve team coach. And he stopped me walking out of the ground through the marble halls. He said, you're going to sit down. There was a little seat in the marble halls. And he sat me down and he said, listen, you do something I've never seen any goalkeeper do. And he wasn't even thinking about Bert Troutman then. He said, you've got a diamond in your game. If you're going to progress ever in football, you've got to be good all the way around. So you need to improve your kicking. You need to improve your crosses and things like that and your ability to handle that. But you've got something that'll have people jumping out their seats. You dive head first, you trust your instinct. And it was my Bert mirror of doing what Bert did. So somebody would be coming through, even Bestie George would be coming through. And I was looking for the moment of miscontrol. And the moment there was a fraction of miscontrol, bang, head first. You never see that now with the goalies. They don't go like that. They stand on the feet. Big Pat, really, my great friend Pat Jennings was the first one to sort of bring in saving with your feet. But my style, you see, Pat hardly ever got an injury in his life because that was his way and he had giant hands and an amazing presence. But my style worked for me. And it was Bert, really, that I was emulating. Yeah.
It's interesting you say that about bravery, Bob, because in the modern game, you could say that goalies are possibly having to be braver in sort of different ways, I guess, with their feet now, playing out from the back. Is that an observation that you've noticed over the years as the game's changed?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, crosses were a mighty thing, and I think the goalkeeper's ability to go out and take the cross now is something that the majority of goalkeepers at the very top level are not able to handle. A la Jennings, I know I'm mentioning David Seaman again, they were extraordinary in that way. But I was under orders. I had, when I played and we had our 6 years of coming first to second in a major competition, I had Frank McClintock at 5'10.5" and Peter Simpson at 5'10.5" or 5'11". And always Don Howe, our coach, said, Willow, it's down to you. Any cross into the box. When we played the cup final against Liverpool, against John Toshak, before the game, he was literally hitting me and saying, today, Willow, they'll be hitting crosses and you are going to come for every cross. And in fact, that in a way caused the mistake I made in the final that gave Liverpool the opening goal, because I was anticipating the cross and started to make that movement and Steve Highway stuck it inside my near post. Fortunately, we came back from it. But I mean, that side of it, and you mentioned, by the way, playing out from the back. If you want me to lose my brains and everything, I think it's ridiculous. I think what they're doing now is ridiculous. It's chancy, it's boring, How many times do you get a goal from the playing out from the back? 1 in a million, 1 in 100, perhaps being too exaggerated there. You know, how many goals are scored because as a result of you playing out, rolling the ball, you know, it comes back to you, then you play it to there and it comes back to you and then you hoof it or you get into trouble. It's a Guardiola, whatever you want to call it, you know, and if you're winning the game 3 or 4-0 and the opposition want to stay off, you're fine. Just keep playing the ball and you win the game. But boring for the crowd. My way was, and most of the goalies of my era would get the ball and be able, Bert Troutman, we taught, he could throw a ball 30, 40 yards. And I would throw a ball 20 yards, 25 yards to either fullback or even hit a sort of ball into John Radford and Ray Kennedy, who were our strikers, so that one would hold up, the other would spin off. And I mean, there is nothing worse for a defending centre half than a ball coming out of the sky. The modern balls now move all over. And then, you know, so I am not a fan of playing out from the back, as you can guess.
In your playing days, Bob, was it more of a separation during training? But because I can imagine this day and age, someone like Edison being very much a part of the Man City training with the players, ball possession, technique, first touch. Was it very different?
Well, I mean, when I played Don Howe, I mean, I kept saying to Don, I need more than being stuck in goal at the end of a training session with 50, 80 shots coming in and most of them going in. I need the confidence. You need to build this up. I'm a teacher, you know. There are no goalkeeping coaches. So Don Howe was great. I always did 45 minutes more at the end of each training session. And ultimately, with Alan Hodgkinson also interested, we became the first ones to realize that you needed a goalkeeping coach. So, I mean, from that point of view, the training, we used to train the whole time. We used to do all the running with the first team squad and everything. And then literally they would stick me in goal and, you know, it wasn't a good thing for confidence. And so I used to go to Don and say, Don, look, I need my own work. I need my handling. You know, I'm either catching away from the body, into the body, the different ways of catching. And he was great in realizing that was what I needed. And in fact, what all goalkeepers need. And I mean, it has changed so dramatically in every respect from the time, you know, we are talking about next year. I mean, we should have had 2 weeks ago, which is very sad, 50 years since we won the first European trophy at Arsenal, which was the Intercities Fairs Cup. And we had a big, you know, a big get-together planned by the club. And that's, you know, had to be put on hold. We hope it'll happen. And then next year, we have the double year, you know, 70, 71, 50 years. I mean, for me to talk to you guys and think it's 50 years since I was part of that squad is crazy.
Well, I think, you know, that's a natural point there to talk about both of those triumphs, because as you say, 51 years and 50 years respectively, it remains only our first of 2 European trophies, doesn't it, in City Fairs in 1970. Now, that was your first taste of success. You established at that point. Enjoy that one against Anderlecht?
I like to think I was established. I mean, what you've got to remember, I always get, if I go to a dinner or anything, you know, and I know I'm up on the side of the stadium now with 31 other players, which is amazing, with my arm linked with Dennis Bergkamp, which is crazy. I'll be the first.
Not a bad place to be.
I know. I mean, it's sort of crazy. But and I get introduced, I go to events and people say, and here he is, we're going to hear from him now, we're going to do a Q&A. He played 310 times for Arsenal, the legend Bob Wilson. And I go mad. Because I played 310 first team games, but I arrived as an amateur school teacher, played 10 games as an amateur school teacher, by the way, which you would never get in the modern game. And then in all, when you look at the records, and I have it proudly downstairs, I made 536 appearances for Arsenal, 310 in the first team and the rest in the stiffs. The stiffs being the reserves, not quite good enough. And so, you know, it took me, having arrived in 63, I had to teach for the 1 year and was an amateur in that first year, played 10 games in the first team, which was astonishing in its way. And then I went into the wilderness. And it was only in the 65-66 season, only 2 years later, reserves, reserved to Jim Fennell and everything. And then suddenly I got the chance. And once that chance came, and within a very short time, I knew that I could make it and I could belong. But I promise you, along the way, there were times when I thought, you know, this ain't for me. I'm going to go back in. I'm going to, you know, apply for a lecturer's job back at Loughborough or something.
Well, you certainly did make it, Bob. I mean, Tom and I were talking the other day. We got stopped in our tracks actually when we discovered that you and Pat Rice were the only two men that have overseen all three doubles that Arsenal have won. Can you just talk us through that week commencing the 3rd of May, 1971?
Yeah, one hell of a week. Because I think, and we will get on to it as a primary focus, that FA Cup final, and what a fantastic day that was. And I think that's etched for many reasons, obviously with the Charlie George winner in many people's minds. But actually, it started pretty specially for Arsenal fans as well, didn't it?
Can I just ask either of you, well, both of you, are either of you Spurs fans?
We're huge Arsenal fans.
We
were trying to keep it subtle, Bob.
Trying to keep it subtle.
You know, partial.
Okay, I'm okay.
Subtle how fantastically that week started.
I have to temper what I say if I know that I'm being asked a question from a Tottenham fan, because I got asked this question again yesterday on a podcast, and it was, you know, in all your time that you played for Arsenal and everything, and what was the moment as a player? And I said, look, how could you ever beat going to your greatest rivals, White Hart Lane, on a Monday night against a club that had been the only club that century to win the double with Danny Blanchflower and Bill Nicholson's brilliant 60-61 side? You go there, there are 20, well, in fact, some people said it was 30-odd thousand still locked out in the streets. We were kicked off late because we couldn't get to the ground. They hadn't got tickets to get in. It was just amazing. And then remember, and this people forget this, it was so precipice time, because we either had to draw the game 0-0 or we had to win it. If we drew 1-1, 2-2, 3-3, Leeds United were champions on goal difference. We had to draw 0-0 and we would have pipped them, or we had to win the game. And I mean, obviously at Tottenham, with those great guys there, Alan Mullery, big patting goal at the other end, Martin Chivers up the front, Alan Gilzine, who later, you know, took a wild kick, and might go into that. Anyway, it was an extraordinary atmosphere. And it was 0-0. It was Martin Peters. I mean, it was just incredible, the whole thing. And we were 0-0, so we were still okay. In a way, when it was 0-0, it was easier than when Ray Kennedy suddenly scored a header from Geordie Armstrong's cross. He headed the ball, it clipped the inside of the crossbar, big pat. There were 3 of them on the line, but it still went in. And that last 8-10 minutes was a nightmare, because they did not want us to win the double, or have the chance to win the double, never mind the league. And I mean, 4 minutes later, I still got the scars. I dived into a pile of boots, and Alan Mullery just went whack and cut my head open. So I had stitches after the game on that. I mean, it was incredible. And then the final whistle went, and it was just elation. I mean, nothing ever could beat not just being champions of your country, because I think that's the most difficult thing to win anyway. Absolutely. Above Champions League or anything else, because you've got to be champions. In our day, it was 42 games in that. And it was just extraordinary. And then we still had to we had the day off the next day, had quite a drink that night at Southgate. I escaped, actually, because I wanted to see the family. And I went through a big window in the toilet area in a pub in Southgate, and escaped to go home and try and share with the family at the moment. But then, you know, to get out, we went training again on the Wednesday. Don Howard thought about Wembley and Bertie Mee, the manager, and it was cut like Wembley. And we prepared, and you know, 5 days later, we equaled what Spurs had done in, 10 years before, and which quite a few clubs have done since. Because I have a joke with David Seaman. I was David Seaman's coach for 16 years of his career. And I always, when we're together, what we're doing now, I say, and don't forget, I was the first Arsenal goalkeeper to do the double. Yeah. And the big guy from Rotherham goes, ho, 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 I did it twice. So He always takes the mickey out of me for that. Yeah.
Having obviously, as you say, achieved such success at White Hart Lane, in many ways, like you say, reached the pinnacle of not only winning the league, but to do that are your rivals. Was there a little bit of difficulty in focus or for that FA Cup final, or did you sense that in the dressing room, the build up, or was it game face on, back to business, we want to get the double?
Oh no, it was trying to, I mean, we'd already put ourselves in the history books. I mean, as a squad, we had done, you've got to remember that the Fairs Cup the previous year, which was the first European trophy, followed 2 losing League Cup finals at Wembley. And one of them, in which I played, on a mud heap that you'd never be allowed to play that game. It was a Horse of the Year show 2 nights before, and we went and we said, oh, this game's going to be off, and they played it. Now, fair dues to Swindon, because they adapted themselves brilliantly and they won it. But from that defeat and the horror of that defeat and all the slagging off that we got from the press and everything else, I think the character of our side then really came together. We'll show you wrong. I mean, I still have the headlines in books at home here, the shame of London, the shame of North London. We got absolutely wellied for losing to Swindon. And then the next year came the Fairs Cup. And then the following year, I mean, that was us at our best. We had an incredible, it's like a family spirit, like a jigsaw puzzle as well, I always say, smooth parts and rough parts. And we just went, wow, and just fitted together perfectly. And so we were absolutely primed to play in the final. I've not watched the game lots of times, but when I've watched it, I've been amazed how many chances we had to win the game. And Ray Clements, who was early on in his career, made either good saves. We hit the post twice. Absolute 2 miss sitters almost from I think Ray Kennedy or Geordie Armstrong. But they don't remember misses. They remember when goalies make mistakes. Yeah. So we were 0-0 at full time, and within the first 2 minutes of the second half, Steve Highway cut inside Pat Rice. And by the way, you're absolutely right. I mean, Pat has been part of 22 winning trophies, I think, at Arsenal. Amazing. But Pat got beaten by Steve Highway, who cut in. And all afternoon, I had gone out for these crosses that Don Howard told me, Willow, you go for every cross, punch it, help it on, catch it. And that's, I did it the whole afternoon, and I came off number 1 against Toshak the whole afternoon. So I started to anticipate here, he's going to cross it, and was out by half a yard or a yard, and he just pinged it. And I mean, I always remember, as I thought, I can remember throwing myself backwards, and I saw it clip the bottom of the post and fly in. And, oh God, it was just, even now, I will remember to the day I die, swiveling round, and Frank McClintock with his hands on his hips. Remember, Frank had lost 2 finals when he was at Leicester. He'd now looked as if he was going to lose a 3rd final when he was at Arsenal, 5 finals losing side, and he had his hands on his hips. And I mean, if looks could kill, he looked at me as if, Willow, you stupid. I mean, he didn't say it, but he wanted to. Yeah. And incredibly, I mean, it was a big, big, deep moment for me. The best thing that for me happened within 3 minutes, because I had one of the best saves I'll ever make in my life. Brian Hall spun and hit it. It would have made it 2-0. We were gone. And instead, I saved. My confidence was back. We were back in there, and within 1 minute of that save, we got a weird goal, which was initially given to George Graham. George claimed it, but it was actually Eddie Kelly got the last touch. And
Does he still claim it? Does he still claim it to this day?
Yeah, I mean, George says he felt the ball, and I mean, it might just have brushed, you never know. Yeah. I mean, we have a laugh about that, because I mean, George and I played our debuts for Scotland on the same game, so we remain big fans. But anyway, we're 1-1, and then suddenly out the blue, the guy who I had in the afternoons early on in my career at Arsenal, I used to go to Holloway School to teach in the afternoon to keep my teaching in. And who should be the star player, but the lad I used to train with on a Monday night when I was an amateur was Charlie George. And Charlie, we all knew this guy. He's got something that I'm talking about people like Gaza or Bestie or you think it's Messi. I know I'm saying Messi, but Charlie had the ability to be looking as if he was scared, not in the game, and suddenly, bang. And that's what happened. He suddenly got a ball from Raddy. Raddy knocked the ball inside John Radford, and he hit this ball right into the top corner. Yeah. And it left us with about, I think, 7 or 8 minutes to go. I was already doing a bit of television work then, and Barry Davies, commentator, was with the BBC, and he was sitting beside the goal, and I retrieved the ball for a goal kick, and he said, 1 minute to go. 1 minute to go. And I'm thinking, oh God, 1 minute to go. How can I do something for 1 minute and not? And they got a corner, and right at the very last kick of the game. And I went to the back post, and Bob McNabb, you see it so clearly. Bob McNabb came and actually hurt me. He hit me right across the back. And he just went, Willow, wherever this ball goes, you're going.
You're getting it.
I'll stay on the line. Ricey was on one side of the post. I mean, I always had my 2 fullbacks behind me, so I could go wandering. And Pat Rice was on the right-hand post, and Bob was behind me, but he hit me. You see him hit me. And this ball came near post high, and I went, and it stuck. Bare hands, no gloves, as it was in that day and age, with a bit of chewing gum spat on the hands, and the ball stuck. And I heard the Arsenal fans go, and I, at that time, could waste time. I dribbled it to the right, I dribbled it to the left, and as I kicked it, the referee blew.
Yeah, the last whistle of that FA Cup final.
Yeah, I mean, it was just a
pandemonium.
It's just one of the great memories. And I mentioned my brother Hugh, who was sort of my mentor, because he was 2.5 years older than myself. And when we collected the cup, I actually had the plinth. So Frank collected the cup. I saw my wife from a distance, and then I'm going down the steps, if you can imagine it, across the back. Royalty present the cup, and I was walking down, and suddenly a hand came on my shoulder, and my brother's ticket for the game, which I'd given him, I didn't know this, was right beside the steps leading down. Oh, and so there was an amazing sort of family moment hug.
Be able to share that, yeah, absolutely.
This is I taught you all you knew sort of thing he was telling me.
And he was like, that's just the teaching bit. That's just the teaching bit. I've done the football myself. But we were also commented, looking at a bit of research for this, obviously, as you'd imagine, that you were player of the season that year, weren't you, at Arsenal? And I hope you don't mind me saying, normally when a player of the year award's given out to a defender or a goalkeeper, it's typically in a year where we've not had a great success. I mean, we were looking, I think the only over 2 times it's happened with a goalkeeper being Arsenal player of the year. Both times were trophyless seasons. And so actually to get the nod in a year that's littered with success, normally it would go to a forward or a midfielder, or, as you say. So that must have been pretty special as well to get that nod from your peers.
Yeah, I mean that I don't think about it terribly much, except I know Frank won the Footballer of the Year, and I think I was third. I was told I was third by the journalists anyway on the Footballer of the Year, and Frank was very kind. He said, well, Willow, you deserved it more than me. But there is nothing greater, even accepting, the Football Writers Award is national news and everything, than I think being voted Player of the Year by the fans at your own club. Absolutely. So for me, it was obviously a huge moment, massive moment, and all the dreams from being a kid, and Bert Troutman and everything else, and all the knockbacks. And there was one amazing thing I just need to tell you. When I was at Man United, on the night that my dad, on the way home, said, I've told him you're not going to be a footballer, you've got to get a proper job. And as I was leaving, there was a man called Bert Wally. Bert Wally was one of the coaches at Man United who died on the following February. This is October 57, and he died February 58 on the crash. And as I was leaving, and I didn't know at the time why he did it, I was sitting down, and I got up, very politely. I said, nice to see you again, because I had been there a couple of times. And he grabbed me and he was shaking me. And he said, son, never forget how good you can be. And I was looking at him, I'm 15, nearly 16 years of age. And he's saying, never forget how good you can be. And it was like, why are you saying that to me? Because my dad hadn't at that time told me that I've said no. And it was only when I went home, it was only then, because I never had a chance again to see Bert or a man called Joe Armstrong, who was the scout who initially said to United, Nobby Stiles and Bob Wilson, they're the 2 that we're going for. And Bert lost his life in that Munich crash. Yeah.
Absolutely.
That had a big impact on my life at the time because, it was, I had met those guys, and Duncan Edwards, 18 years of age, and just incredible, yeah.
Was there a sense of things worked out the way they were meant to? Were you that kind of person to look back and say, do you know what, this was the path that was meant to happen then?
Yeah, without any question, without any doubt. I mean, that's another great question, because people say, look, if you'd signed for Man United, do you think you'd have been a better goalie? Would you have played for, because the rule at the time said you could only play for the country in which you were born. Hence, I played for England schoolboys. Only in 1970-71, in October 71, did they change the rule, and Tommy Docherty picked me for Scotland, which, I've got a Scottish mum, a Scottish dad, a Scottish family. It was a decent rule. I don't agree with the grandfathers and great-grandfathers thing. So it was, at the time, with Manchester United, it has always been a case. Would I have been a better goalie? Would I have had an even greater career than I had? And I like to think that I was so raw in the way that I played, a la Bert. Head first was the eye catcher, but I had to do so much more. Even when I was at Wolves, who were saying you've got to improve your catching and your crosses and everything. So I like to think that I might well have been on the scrap heap by the time I was 17, 18. And by going to Loughborough, being part of we got to the quarterfinal of the Amateur Cup, beat Bishop Auckland. I got into the England amateur squad and the Olympic squad. So I was still raising a few eyebrows. And fortunately, when I was playing for British universities, Bertie Mee was the physio for the British universities. And he went to Billy Wright and said, we've got a nutter of a goalie, but he's good. He told me this. And he said, look, he's crackers. He's absolutely crackers, but, and that's how it came about that Bertie was the one. Ironically, he then became manager when Arsenal sacked Billy Wright in 1966. Bertie became the manager. And I know I have a picture when we've won the cup and we go on the pitch, and there's this beaming face, because he always believed that I could make it. And Don Howe alongside him. And Don Howe, when I was the amateur school teacher, and the guy said, look, he's an amateur, come on, we've got to have a proper goalie. Don Howe he was a player at the time at the club, and he and Bertie were instrumental in me eventually getting there, as it were.
Sort of, I guess, following on from that, what would be really interesting is if we could get a snapshot from you about some of those players that you played with at that time in that team, and we'll include Bertie as well. And if we could, for the FA Cup special, as it were, if we say the name of the individual and their number on the shirt, if you could give us maybe one or two words which you think sort of capture who they were or what they were to you. That would be really interesting as just sort of an insight piece. And we'll leave yourself till last, and we might ask you what your teammates may have thought of you at that time. But yeah, I don't know if Andrew, you want to run through that.
Yeah, so we're thinking one or two words maximum for this. This is a bit of a FA Cup challenge.
Blimey, okay.
We'll start off with number 2 for the day. Number 2, from Northern Ireland, Pat Rice.
Raw. Brilliant defender. That's 3 words, I know.
That'll do.
Number 3, Bob McNabb.
Absolute. Oh, sorry.
No, you can go for it. You can have a couple more. We'll let you off. You want us to double?
I mean, a director in charge of the back 4.
Number 4, then, Peter Storey.
Crackers. He was the Nobby Styles at our side. I know I'm going off on one here, but my God, Snouty. We called him Snouty. So stand clear, because he was like Nobby and like Norman and all bite your legs. Stand clear when what a great tackler extreme. Yeah.
Then captain for the day, the Frank McClintock.
Inspirational, one of the greatest leaders ever as a captain.
Peter Simpson, number 6.
Underrated.
Number 7, George Armstrong.
George Armstrong, how did he and Peter Simpson never play for England? Great left winger. Kindest, most generous guy I've probably ever met.
Number 8, George Graham.
Stroller. That was his nickname. Elegant, dressed like Armani, deadly in the air. Great thinker about the game.
John Radford, number 9.
Oh, wonderful goal scorer, huge pace and physique, great leader of the line.
Number 10, Ray Kennedy.
Perfect foil for Radford. Built like a door. I won't say the words there. Deadly left foot. Eventually became left half for Liverpool, which is another story.
And then we're finishing off. We've got number 11. Who the guy that scored the goal? Who scored the winner? What was his name again?
Charlie.
Charlie George. That's the one.
That's the one. Yeah, as if we
Slipped
forget
my mind,
that.
Bob.
Charlie, genius. When you have the ability to do what he did and best he did, and Messi and these guys, footballing genius. Not a genius at school. He got expelled, by the way, before his time.
Sounds about right. Sounds about right.
And then we're finishing off the team with another genius, number 1, Bob Wilson.
Got there in the end is the best way I would say it. Thanks to the inspiration of Bert and I mean, I know what everybody says about me, all Arsenal fans, as you know, I would never put myself in the category of Pat Jennings, David Seaman, Jack Kelsey, who was just before my time. But I'm always listed as the most courageous. Now, I know what they mean, but it was a God-given ability to put my head in where it hurt and come out with a ball.
Half time. Get your oranges.